Rain tapped softly against the restaurant windows while Lena Hart rushed between tables balancing plates and glasses. It was a quiet night, the kind where tips were small but the work was peaceful. She preferred it that way. Trouble rarely came to places like this, at least that's what she thought. The door suddenly swung open. 5 men walked in wearing dark suits, their presence heavy and commanding. The entire room seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped. Even the chef peeked nervously from the kitchen. At the center of the group stood Adrian Volkov, the billionaire everyone in the city whispered about. A man who owned half the businesses in town and controlled the rest through fear. Lena had heard the stories, but tonight was the first time she had seen him. Her manager rushed forward nervously, bowing his head slightly as he led them to the best table. "Anything you need, sir," he said with a trembling voice. A few minutes later, Lena approached their table with a tray of drinks. She kept her eyes down, hoping to serve them quickly and leave. Adrian studied her quietly. Then he spoke, his voice smooth but sharp. "This place hires children now?" His men laughed. Lena froze. Her hands tightened around the tray. She had endured rude customers before, but something about the mocking laughter burned inside her chest. Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching her reaction with amusement. "Tell me," he added casually, "do they pay you enough to look that miserable?" The laughter grew louder. Before she could stop herself, Lena raised her hand. Slap, asterisk asterisk. The sound echoed across the silent restaurant. Adrian's guards instantly stepped forward. But Adrian simply turned his head back toward her, and slowly smiled. The restaurant remained frozen in silence after the slap. Glasses stopped clinking, forks hung in midair, and every customer stared in disbelief. Lena's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Adrian's guards instantly stepped forward, hands moving toward the weapons under their jackets. One of them grabbed Lena's arm roughly, ready to drag her away. "Let me deal with her, boss," the guard muttered angrily. The manager rushed over, pale and shaking. "Sir, please forgive her. She's just a stupid girl. She didn't mean it." "Enough." Adrian's calm voice cut through the tension like a blade. The guard immediately released Lena and stepped back. Adrian slowly stood up from his chair, straightening his expensive suit as if nothing unusual had happened. A faint red mark was still visible on his cheek where Lena had struck him. Yet his expression showed no anger. He stepped closer to Lena. Everyone expected him to punish her. Lena held her breath, refusing to look away even though fear crawled up her spine. If this was the moment she got thrown out, or worse, she would face it standing. Adrian studied her carefully, almost like he was examining something rare. Then, unexpectedly, a small smirk appeared on his lips. "Interesting," he said quietly. The room remained silent. He leaned slightly closer to Lena so only she could hear him. "Do you realize," he murmured, "that every person in this room fears me?" Lena said nothing. Adrian's eyes gleamed with amusement. "But now," he added calmly, "after what you just did, they'll fear you too." The entire restaurant stared in confusion as Adrian simply returned to his seat like nothing had happened. Whispers spread across the restaurant like wildfire. No one understood what had just happened. A woman had slapped Adrian Volkov, the most feared man in the city, and somehow she was still standing. Lena remained frozen beside the table, her mind racing. She had expected shouting, punishment, maybe even violence. Instead, Adrian calmly picked up his glass and took a slow sip of his drink as if the moment meant nothing. But his eyes never left her. The manager nervously wiped sweat from his forehead and leaned toward Lena. "Go back to the kitchen," he whispered urgently. "Right now." Before she could move, Adrian raised one finger. "Stay." The single word made everyone stop again. Lena felt the weight of every stare in the room. Adrian gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." Her stomach twisted. Sitting with him felt even more dangerous than the slap. But refusing might be worse. Slowly, she placed the tray on the table and sat down. Adrian's men watched her with disbelief. None of them had ever seen someone treat their boss this way and survive. Adrian leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena," she answered quietly. "Lena," he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes." "And you still slapped me?" His tone wasn't angry. It sounded curious. Lena swallowed but met his gaze. "You deserved it." For a moment, Adrian stared at her in silence. Then he laughed softly. "Good," he said. His men looked shocked. Adrian leaned back in his chair and studied her again, his smirks slowly returning. "You're either very brave," he said, "or very foolish." Lena felt the tension in the air tighten like a pulled wire. Adrian's quiet laugh had unsettled everyone at the table. His men exchanged confused glances, clearly unsure how their boss would react next. Adrian tapped his fingers lightly against the table while studying Lena, as if she were a puzzle he enjoyed solving. "Tell me something, Lena," he said calmly. "Do you usually slap powerful men in restaurants?" "No," she replied honestly. "Only the rude ones?" he asked with a faint smile. Lena didn't answer, but the look in her eyes was enough. Adrian chuckled again, clearly entertained. One of his men, a tall and sharp-faced man named Victor, stepped forward impatiently. "Boss, this is ridiculous," he muttered. "She disrespected you in front of everyone. Let us handle it." Several customers nervously lowered their heads. They knew what "handle it" usually meant. But Adrian raised his hand, silencing Victor immediately. "No." The single word carried absolute authority. Victor stepped back, though his glare toward Lena was filled with anger. Adrian turned his attention back to her. "You work here every night?" "Yes." "And you're not afraid of me?" Lena hesitated for the first time. Of course she was afraid. Anyone in the city would be. But something about Adrian's mocking attitude had sparked a stubborn fire inside her. "I am," she admitted quietly. Adrian tilted his head slightly, intrigued by the honesty. "Yet you still stood your ground." He leaned closer, his voice lowering. "People like you are rare in my world." For a moment he studied her face again, then slowly pushed his chair back and stood up. "Finish your shift tonight," he said. Lena frowned in confusion. Adrian adjusted his suit and added calmly, "Tomorrow, you're coming to work for me." For a moment, Lena thought she had heard him wrong. "Work for you?" she repeated slowly. The idea sounded absurd. She was a waitress who struggled to pay rent. Adrian Volkov was a billionaire who ruled the city's underworld. Their worlds were never supposed to cross again after tonight. Adrian picked up his coat from the back of his chair, completely calm. "Yes," he said simply. The manager stepped forward nervously. "Sir, she's just a waitress. I'm sure you can find someone more." Adrian glanced at him once. The manager immediately fell silent. Lena stood up from the table, shaking her head. "I'm not interested." A few gasps came from nearby tables. No one rejected Adrian Volkov. Adrian looked amused instead of offended. "You slapped me in front of 50 witnesses," he reminded her. "Do you really think the story will stay inside this room?" Lena felt her stomach drop. People were already whispering. By morning, the entire city would know. Adrian slipped his hands into his pockets and continued calmly. "Some people will admire your courage." He paused. "Others will see it as disrespect toward me." His meaning was clear. Danger. Lena felt the weight of the situation settling around her. If the wrong people believed she had humiliated Adrian, they might try to punish her themselves. Adrian watched the realization appear in her eyes. "So here's the deal," he said. "You come work for me, and you'll have my protection." "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. Adrian walked past her toward the door. Without even looking back, he answered, "Then tomorrow, you'll find out how dangerous attention can be." The restaurant door closed behind Adrian, leaving a heavy silence in the room. For several seconds no one moved. It felt as if the entire building had forgotten how to breathe. Then the whispers began. Customers leaned toward each other, speaking in hushed voices. Some stared at Lena with shock, others with curiosity. A few looked at her with something close to fear. Lena stood beside the table, her mind spinning. Her manager rushed over immediately, his face pale with panic. "What have you done?" he whispered harshly. "Do you realize who that man is?" "Yes," Lena replied quietly. The manager rubbed his temples in frustration. "You're lucky you're still alive. People disappear for much less when it comes to him." Lena looked toward the door where Adrian had left. His final words echoed in her mind. "You'll find out how dangerous attention can be." She glanced around the restaurant again. The looks people were giving her now were different. The story was already spreading. The woman who slapped Adrian Volkov. One of the cooks stepped out from the kitchen, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've worked here 10 years, he said. "I've seen men beg for mercy in front of him. But you hit him." Lena exhaled slowly, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in her head. Work for him? It sounded insane. Yet Adrian hadn't looked angry. If anything, he seemed interested, like he had discovered something valuable. Outside, the distant sound of black cars driving away faded into the night. Lena knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow morning, her quiet life as a waitress would be over. Whether she accepted Adrian's offer or not, her world had already changed forever.